Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. Worries about impaired driving on New Year's Eve as friends mourn the death of a Vancouver taxi driver. Also,
I have to pay for more than 50%.
why your next takeout meal could cost you more. And
it's hard to believe that this is going to be a place where it's easy to find a lovely, inexpensive home anytime.
what's in store for Metro Vancouver's housing market in 2020.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening. Well, your next takeout meal may be getting a bit more expensive. Starting in just a few days, styrofoam containers will be banned in Vancouver. And as the CBC's Tina Lovegreen is finding out, some restaurants say the cost of reducing waste will likely get passed on to consumers.
When you order sushi to go, it's likely to come in several small styrofoam containers. But not at Momo Sushi in Vancouver's West End. The restaurant switched over to these paper containers just last month.
We have something kind of different size of and a small paper thing.
Starting New Year's Day, all restaurants in Vancouver will have to stop serving food in foam cups and containers. It's part of the city's strategy to reduce single-use items, but going green can come at a cost.
Everything is going up.
He says these paper containers cost 15% more than their foam counterparts. And for a business that relies heavily on takeaway orders, eventually they'll have to pass the higher costs onto consumers.
But it's very difficult for our business because, especially in the downtown Vancouver, many new restaurants are coming up every year.
Banning foam containers is just the first step. Plastic straws will follow in April, and takeaway forks and knives will be available by request only. And to-go coffee cups will cost you an extra 25 cents. And by 2021, plastic shopping bags will be banned.
Maybe 30.
Which is why he's also stopped ordering plastic bags. These are the last batch. Then he's switching over to paper. And in the near future, the restaurant hopes customers will bring their own containers.
If you customer bring your own container, we're gonna discount and something food.
All in an effort to reduce waste. Tina Lovegreen, CBC News, Vancouver.
Friends are mourning tonight. A taxi driver hit and killed while driving his cab. Speed and alcohol are believed to be factors in the crash, and the driver of the other vehicle was in a rideshare car. As Eva Ugwen-Senj reports, with ride-hailing services still not available in Metro Vancouver, there are concerns about impaired driving ahead of New Year's Eve celebrations.
A tribute to tragedy is growing at the corner of First and Renfrew. Friends of Sanepal Singh Randhawa gathered there today, too emotional to share their memories of the 28-year-old cab driver. He was killed early Sunday morning when a car-to-go smart car crashed into his taxi, sending the cab into a bank building. The smart car's driver, a man in his 20s, is still recovering in hospital from serious injuries.
We believe speed and alcohol were factors in the collision. It also appears, based on the preliminary investigation, that the car-to-go driver may have gone through a red light.
In a statement, the car-sharing company that owns Car2Go Smart Cars said, Share Now has always had a zero-tolerance policy against impaired driving. Any customer found to be driving impaired will have their membership permanently revoked. But a criminal lawyer says zero-tolerance policies are only effective if they're enforced.
The problem is with these policies, they're not enforced, the drivers aren't reminded about them, and their attention isn't specifically drawn to them when they enter into the contract. So most people who use these companies probably don't even know that these policies exist and that they're required to abide by them.
Okay. And Randhawa had worked for Yellow Cab since 2015. His friends were left reeling by his death.
Imagine, it's like, I can't explain my feeling right now because...
A tragic reminder of the consequences of drinking and driving with New Year's Eve celebrations coming up. Eva Ugwen-Senj, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, for the first time in 5 years, there were no major surges in the housing market in Metro Vancouver in 2019, but that stability is not guaranteed next year. Justin McElroy has more on what the housing market might hold for 2020.
A funny thing happened in Vancouver's housing market in 2019. For the first time in many years, not much happened.
The fear of missing out, madness at open houses has gone away. So there's been a pause in the market. Vancouver's not magically affordable, but it's less bad than it was.
Whether it was the speculation tax, international instability, or tougher mortgage rules, the runaway home prices and front-page political battles that came with it stopped being a front-page issue.
I think the days of 20 and 30% increases are basically over in metropolitan Vancouver.
SFU's Andy Yan was one of the first people to sound the alarm when Vancouver's housing crisis began. He predicts the big debate this year will be over new rental buildings, both where they are and who gets to live in them.
There is a propensity to not necessarily be critical about really what kinds of rental units are being put online. But I think when we look at the kind of key questions moving forward, it's going to be about the idea of 2- and 3-bedroom rental units mixed in with non-market housing that I think will probably be one of the bigger issues moving forward.
Of course, that doesn't mean the housing market is affordable. Vacancy still hovers around 1%, and home prices are among the highest in North America.
How a beautiful place surrounded by mountains and oceans with hopefully continuingly stable government that's mostly interested in the well-being of its citizens. That's a rare thing in the world, and it's hard to believe that this is going to be a place where it's easy to find a lovely, inexpensive home anytime.
Add in the lack of new taxes being considered, along with continued low interest rates, and neither Davidoff or Yan want to predict whether the housing market will stay soft. A rare case where 2020 has an unclear vision. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Vancouver.
Are the animals living at the Greater Vancouver Zoo in Aldergrove frustrated and bored? The Vancouver Humane Society is calling on the zoo to improve conditions. The animal welfare group commissioned a report which finds some of the animals are living in barren and small enclosures, and many suffer from a lack of stimulation, unable to engage in natural behaviors. The zoo houses around 600 animals. And a new year, a new decade is almost upon us, but a reminder there won't be a major outdoor public celebration this year. The annual fireworks show at Cole Harbour has been canceled. The organizers announced in October they are taking a one-year hiatus in order to refocus their efforts and move the event to Falls Creek next New Year's Eve. Organizers say the new location will allow for new installations and will be more accessible and family-friendly. In past years, more than 100,000 people have taken in New Year's Eve fireworks in Cole Harbour. Well, a bad hairdo, a broken ATM machine, and bad traffic. Those are just some of the worst nuisance calls taken by 911 operators in BC this year. And as the CBC's Estefania Duran reports, ECOM is warning of a worrying trend.
Based on what you're explaining to me, this is going to be a non-emergency call.
Every day, 911 operators are inundated.
911 is for life or death emergencies only, so I mean, if you can't get your car out of the snow, then maybe take the bus or SkyTrain wherever you're going, okay?
Just one example of many non-emergency calls this year. So which one took the #1 spot?
A caller had called in reporting that the caller's vehicle didn't fit in the parking stall. He was given at a hotel.
But the others aren't far behind. Someone complaining after a salon didn't style their hair properly. Another caller angry because their neighbor was vacuuming too late at night.
One that shocked me the most was the person phoning to complain about police being too loud while they were responding to an emergency and asking if they could come back the next day.
Operators take about 4,000 calls a day, which means every second spent on a nuisance call is time not spent on a real emergency. And there's also fear of a worrying trend.
This is our 7th year now that we've been doing this campaign. And what's alarming this year really is the increasing number of people who seem to be aware that their situation isn't an emergency.
Some even call asking for traffic updates.
I think it's an incredible waste of public resources.
People will complain about anything, I guess, to anyone who will listen.
It's irresponsible, and it's made for only the most serious of emergencies.
ECOM says the message is not getting across, and no matter how absurd the call may seem, Bradley says operators need to take each one seriously.
Recently in the States, there surfaced again the story of a woman phoning 911 to order a pizza, and there was actually an emergency happening, but she wasn't able to speak freely. We need to make sure everybody is safe, and that takes time.
So next time you get a bad hairdo or get stuck in a small parking lot, think twice before calling 911.
Are you safe right now?
Estefania Duran, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, it's a major milestone for Abbotsford International Airport. Patricia Lovett of Maple Ridge is the 1 millionth passenger to travel through the airport. She learned the news after returning home this weekend on a flight from Edmonton. Abbotsford Airport has been in operation for 23 years. The city bought the airport from the federal government for just $10 in 1997 on the condition it remain an airfield.
It's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Close to home, everything. Convenient for people that live out, between Maple Ridge and Chilliwack. Very convenient.
The airport hopes to reach the 2 million passenger mark within the next 2 to 5 years. Well, it's a bittersweet anniversary to share with you now. Nearly 40 years after her family fled communist rule in Cambodia, a BC woman is doing her part to advocate for new refugees. As Belpuri reports, her story is unique, as her family thought they'd be the last ones let in under a special program.
Hi, Grandpa. Hi, Grandma.
He's kissing you.
Grandma and Grandpa are in Cambridge, Ontario.
I love you too, Kai.
2-year-old Kai is in Vancouver, too young to grasp the story behind their arrival in Canada almost 40 years ago.
My parents survived the bombing of Cambodia, the genocide that ensued afterwards, and they fled to a refugee camp on the border of Cambodia and Thailand, where my mother gave birth to me.
Her parents named her Edang after the refugee camp.
I carry the memory of my family history with me every day because it's essentially inscribed in my name itself.
That history is the story of a homeland invaded and overthrown and the death and displacement of millions of Cambodians. Edang Trung's arrival in Canada came with the most official of welcomes from the Prime Minister of the day.
There was a touch of nervousness on both sides as Pierre Trudeau met the Trung family. This is baby Edang. In a few weeks, she'll celebrate her first birthday in her new home in Goodrich.
Edang calls it a postcard-perfect photo commemorating her family's arrival, but her parents had no idea what laid ahead in a small town where they were the only ones of Asian descent.
Most of the time, their challenges revolved around just trying to find work, trying to keep the jobs that they had, the social isolation our family faced, the economic and financial poverty that we lived in. My older brother, he was beaten and bloody. He had been bullied at school for being one of the only Asian kids in the school.
The pressure to assimilate went hand in hand with the outpouring of generosity from strangers who would become neighbors and friends. When the issue of turmoil in Cambodia first came to light, Canada agreed to take in 60,000 refugees under a special program that let private citizens help out. The Trung family was sponsored by members of a Catholic church. The Prime Minister was there to meet them because they were supposed to be the last family to arrive under the program. That, however, wasn't the case.
I think my experience and my family's experience shows that Canada has been compassionate towards refugees in the past and has mobilized on behalf of previous waves of refugees. I would really like to see Canada do more today for the new waves of refugees.
Edang is an associate professor at UBC and regularly advocates for new refugees. Her parents have closed their convenience store and retired.
We're going to say bye now.
Say bye-bye.
But no one has forgotten the past.
I think those wounds never go away, even after 40 years.
Bye, Mom. Bye, Dad.
Belpuri, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, a bit of a warning tonight. A rainstorm is sweeping through Metro Vancouver, and it could mean some flooding. Environment Canada says heavy rain is expected over the next 24 hours starting tonight. Forecasters warn there could be flooding in low-lying areas and washouts near rivers, creeks, and culverts. And for more on that, let's bring in Brett Soderholm now. Brett, it's not just Metro Vancouver, is it, that's dealing with all this rain?
No, there are many places across the province right now that are going to be dealing with some heavy rain over the next 24 to 48 hours, and certainly winding up 2019 in a particularly soggy fashion. But you know it is serious when Vancouver itself, notoriously or stereotypically a very rainy place within the country, is under a rainfall warning. We have anywhere between 40, maybe even 60 millimeters going to be falling over the next little while here, but across the western portions of Vancouver Island, easily that's going to be 100 millimeters, maybe even a bit more, and far to the north, rather to the central coast that is, still looking at very similar amounts of rain at that point in time. Now, if you take a look at our satellite and radar imagery right now, you're going to notice that showers are certainly starting, but we are going to be seeing a fairly noticeable transition from showers into heavy rain over the next, I would say, 8 to 12 hours. So when you look at our current temperatures, however, the trade-off is it is relatively mild. Everywhere that you're seeing around here, this will be above seasonal for this time of year. A daytime high would be closer to about 6 degrees or so. To see us at 8 degrees is definitely a little bit above that. But what our current look ahead has, you're going to notice a lot of rain in the forecast and fairly high confidence for here as well. Temperatures are not going to be budging, but by tomorrow morning, tomorrow is going to be a day where you absolutely need that umbrella, some good old-fashioned rain boots, and basically whatever else you can take out of the closet. You'll need it all day, and by tomorrow afternoon, for sure, it is going to be falling heavily at times. And I'll have more on that when I come back.
I guess the perfect way for Vancouverites and British Columbians to ring in the new year.
You got that absolutely right.
Thanks, Brett.
You're welcome.
Well, working at sea can be a tough job, and the stress can have an impact on employees' mental health. So 4 years ago, the Archdiocese of Vancouver ordained permanent deacons and assigned them to the Apostleship of the Sea. Tonight, we introduce you to a Catholic port chaplain who greets the thousands of seafarers working on the container ships and tankers in Metro Vancouver ports.
I'm Deacon Dilip Bathe, and I coordinate the Catholic chaplaincy for the Port of Vancouver. You can call me a chaplain, a port chaplain. My parishioners, I guess, are the people who I work with or offer service to are seafarers.
Thank you for coming. God bless you, family back home. Thank you for coming, sir. But when I started 4 years ago, and it was a steep gangway like this, and then I went to take my step, and I had a little slip on the very first step, and my heart jumped into my mouth, and I was so scared. I know of potential chaplains who never became port chaplains because they couldn't get over having to go up and down gangways like this.
Some 90% of all the trade that we do, all the imports and exports that come into Canada, come on these ships. As large as these ships are, they're usually only between 20 to 24, 25 seafarers on board these ships. They are on board ships for extended periods of time, anywhere from 3 months to 10 months. And you guys also here out at sea, right? Stay well, stay well. And being away from home, from family, from their whatever community setting, is the basis for such a long time, is the basis for their kind of pastoral need. Here's some chocolates for you guys. I was a college or university professor for almost 45 years. I don't look that old, but I am old. and I love teaching. I love being with them. So that relationship with adults, you know, I think fits well. And the YM uniformity is this ship right here. In retirement, the opportunity came up to become a deacon in the Catholic Church. We didn't have permanent deacons in the Archdiocese of Vancouver until my batch was ordained a little more than 4 years ago. So just providing a little bit of a relief, a little kind of, not only spiritual help, but also the temporal help. Little gifts, driving them to the mall, bringing them bread from Cobb's, you know, at Christmas time, now giving them Christmas gifts and that sort of thing. God bless, all the best to you, okay? And for your family. We enjoy the benefits of these ships coming in and bringing in cargo, taking out cargo, and so on. And so if you ever see a group of seafarers at the malls, just say hi. They're so happy to meet anyone from shore. I feel so blessed at the end of the day because I sometimes don't feel, well, who's helping home? Because it's just a very rewarding work.
Fair nice. And of course, just a reminder, you can watch this newscast live on CBC Gem. The free app is also where you can find other CBC programs. CBC Vancouver is also on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. A small community on the west coast of Vancouver Island just got its first, well, I can't tell you. You'll have to wait till after the break. Thanks so much for joining us tonight on our Facebook, YouTube live stream.
The
Dan,
full
Dan
meal
also
deal on
came.
the social media. Yes,
Yeah.
indeed. Nice to see everybody.
All right, it might be the most wonderful time of year, but the holidays can also be the most wasteful.
Green advocates are urging BC residents to be mindful of their garbage heading into 2020. Our John Hernandez reports on how you can reduce your waste heading into the new year and beyond.
Christmas is in the rearview mirror, and as usual, waste bins on this quiet residential Burnaby Street are overflowing.
It's horrific.
Yeah, totally horrific.
It's, ugh. We really don't do very much that way.
We really cut back a lot this year.
It's the time of year when the amount of waste making its way to the landfill soars. Canadians produce about 25% more garbage over the holidays. Everything from gift wrap to boxes and packaging, even old furniture.
We produce a lot more because we're doing a lot more stuff, right? So we're doing more gift giving, more entertaining, more food waste, more packaging waste. So there can be a lot of garbage that's produced at this time of year.
But the holidays aren't over yet, and there are still ways to curb how much you're throwing out.
If you've got reusable gift bags, for example, hang on to those. You can use them again next year. Hang on to any bows and ribbons. You can use them again next year. You know, if you do have food waste, if you still have Christmas dinner leftovers in the fridge, now's a great time. Pop them in the freezer. You can use them for lunches and dinners in January.
These remote control cars I bought on Craigslist.
And once the holidays are over, some waste advocates say the new year is a perfect time to keep the momentum going.
We really are trying to battle against this consumer culture. It'll be like one component that stops working, and then the whole thing gets thrown out.
Dan Withers says a good New Year's resolution is to send fewer items to the garbage can. Sometimes that means getting older household items, like this broken kettle, fixed up rather than thrown away.
When we think about repair, I think the end goal is really to try to get everyone to buy less. So I think I would encourage people to look at their stuff and, you know, really take a look to say, is this something I actually need to get replaced, or can I get this fixed? If it doesn't look as nice, can you get it touched up somewhere?
For those looking to reduce their waste in 2020, Withers plans to host monthly repair cafes where people can learn how to fix everything from electronics to clothes for free. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, Dan, what did you do to be more green this holiday season?
Recycled the bags for the
Okay.
young people in the family, just wrapped them in tissue paper, and they didn't look too badly, thankfully. How about you?
Good. I always buy wrapping paper that's recyclable.
Good idea.
And yes, I'm that person who folds up the tissue paper and then packs it away and reuses it next year.
So you're the one. Good idea. Mom was
Might
right.
have a few creases, but that's fine.
Oh, that's it. Forget it then.
Stick with us. We'll be back in a few moments with more news. Drastic new security measures are in place in Jewish neighborhoods around New York tonight after Saturday's horrific stabbing rampage at a Hanukkah gathering. As Paul Hunter reports, anxiety grows as new details emerge about the man accused in the attack.
Shackled and now facing federal hate crime charges, Grafton Thomas told a judge in New York State today his head isn't clear at all, but he said, "I am coherent." 2 nights ago, northwest of New York City, a man walked into a rabbi's house during Hanukkah celebrations and began slashing people with a machete, wounding 5. Today, the community's sobering response.
You have to fight back.
With the blessing of local authorities, a private security company with retired police, FBI agents, and intentionally fearsome equipment will now patrol local synagogues.
In a very, very menacing, omnipresent truck. This is part of it. This is how it works. So don't hide, you hide in plain sight.
That's on top of increased patrols by neighborhood watch groups, extra security cameras, and more regular police throughout the area.
We have to give people a sense of security, and we have to show that this horrible trend we've seen over the last weeks will be stopped dead in its tracks.
Indeed, fears are ratcheted because of that trend, a series of apparent hate crimes in the New York region. Today, this photo of Saturday's attack about to begin, and this video of the suspect's arrest later in Manhattan, police with guns drawn, in the car a bloodied machete. In the home of Grafton Thomas, police say they found handwritten journals with Nazi symbols and other anti-Semitic references. But, says a family friend,
Grafton is not a terrorist. He is a man who has mental illness in America, and the systems that be have not served him well.
And court was told today lately he'd been hearing voices.
You feel bad at all?
Still, police say the internet history on his cell phone shows multiple recent searches for the phrase, "Why did Hitler hate the Jews?" and another, "For German Jewish temples near me." Paul Hunter, CBC News, Washington.
Drastic new security measures are in place. I believe we're going to a different story now. A volunteer security officer in Texas is being praised for his quick thinking, saying he may have saved hundreds of lives. That's after he shot and killed a gunman who attacked parishioners at a church service. The attack happened during a live-streamed service yesterday. A gunman sitting in a pew opened fire, killing 2 people. A volunteer church security officer responded quickly, shooting and killing the gunman just seconds later.
The whole thing was less than 6 seconds from start to finish. And, that was, I had to make sure I didn't hit, someone, a member there, as they were right in front of me.
A law recently took effect that allows licensed handgun owners to carry their weapons in places of worship. Well, about halfway up the west coast of Vancouver Island is a remote community experiencing something new and exciting: cell service. A house at BC just got its first wireless tower, and as Greg Rasmussen shows us, it's already changing everyday life.
School's out in a house-it. Like other teenagers, kids bury their faces in their cell phones. But in this Indigenous community of 900 on an isolated island off the rugged west coast, it's a brand new experience.
I was happy that I could receive text messages and not use my Wi-Fi.
A little different, everybody's on their phone more. Yeah.
Teacher Ethan Wills is now in the same boat as most Canadian educators.
When the switch was flicked, you could tell kids were a little more distracted and a little less attentive to me, unfortunately. Ultimately, I do think it's going to be a major benefit for them. Having more information coming, more information readily available is a good thing. We just got to figure out how to navigate around it.
TELUS has just finished this $500,000 tower in the middle of the community. For some, it's life-changing. It's now easier for Gino John to arrange medical care for his special needs child.
I have no landline, and having this kind of benefits just to email his doctors.
Before cell service, VHF radios were the best way to get a taste of what was happening.
We have apple turnovers for sale, Black Forest chocolate cupcakes.
VHFs are everywhere, in vehicles, homes, and even on the hip. Today, word spreads about a wild animal near the school.
Please come pick them up.
Cougar wandering under there.
Bonnie, I'll be out for about half an hour. Okay.
The new cell service should help keep people safe on the ocean.
Your highway is a paved highway, ours is water highway.
In 2015, the whale-watching boat Leviathan II sank nearby. 6 people died, but rescuers from a house-it saved 21 others. A lack of cell service made it difficult to coordinate the rescue.
It'll make it more quicker to communicate with the people we need to communicate with.
90% of Indigenous communities in BC now have cell service, but building towers is expensive, meaning isolated areas with small numbers of people still lack coverage.
Some of the highways still have some gaps from connectivity, and we're working on that. And in that way, we are looking to government to say, how can we work together?
See you later.
In a house-it, people are quickly getting used to the new service.
Get a text message my mom, I should tell her.
What are you typing there?
I just put them on the news, Mom.
And proving it by sending off a quick selfie.
Where's the camera? There we go,
okay. Greg Rasmussen, CBC News, a house-it, BC.
Mass evacuations in Australia as fires sweep the southeast. What soaring temperatures and strong winds mean for a popular New Year's celebration after the break. Here are some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News. A memorial is growing for a 28-year-old taxi driver killed in a crash in Vancouver. And as friends mourn his death, there's concern about drinking and driving on New Year's Eve tomorrow night. Police reminding you to find an alternative way to get home.
I'm still thinking about increase the price.
Your next takeout meal may cost you more. Vancouver's styrofoam ban kicks into full gear in a few days. And as restaurants make the switch to more costly containers, many are already passing on the costs to you. Bored and frustrated, the Humane Society is calling on the Greater Vancouver Zoo in Aldergrove to build larger cages and stop housing animals that aren't suited to live in BC. The zoo has yet to respond, but says it does contribute to conservation efforts in the province. Well, in parts of Australia tonight, the end of the year looks something like the end of the world. In a town on the eastern coast, 4,000 residents have taken emergency shelter on a beach. Their homes no longer safe as encroaching fires and smoke painted the sky in ominous shades of red and orange.
So we've got embers going into Malakuta at the moment. We've got 4,000 people on the beach there that are being very well protected by our firefighters.
Those are just some of the people being told to evacuate today as soaring temperatures and strong winds send flames racing toward Australia's southeast coast. As the CBC's Kim Brunhuber explains, the situation has some wondering whether a popular New Year celebration should be put on hold.
For thousands of people in the state of Victoria, a terrifying emergency warning. Stay inside, take shelter. It's too late to run.
So the point being, you should not be on the roads. With the emergency warnings that are in place, these are critical to you and for your safety and your security.
Wildfires throughout the country have forced tens of thousands from their homes and killed at least 10 people. The latest, a volunteer firefighter died Monday when his truck rolled over in high winds. 28-year-old Samuel McPaul's wife is due in May. Those winds carry sparks up to 5 kilometers, and a heat wave has led to temperatures over 40 degrees in every state. Now, a new threat, a phenomenon some scientists call the fire-breathing dragon of clouds. When the smoke rises, it can form clouds called pyrocumulonimbus. These giant thunderclouds can grow into huge storms with lightning that then sparks more fires.
It put up a column punching into the atmosphere 14 kilometres high. We've just more recently looked at the columns and they're generating their own weather. There's lightning coming out of these columns. It is unpredictable. It's dangerous out there.
It's already December 31st in Australia, and there have been calls to cancel Sydney's famed New Year's Eve fireworks. More than 250,000 people signed a petition asking the government to use those funds to fight fires instead.
I think they should just ban it just for this year while this is all happening, because this is the first time that I've known that it's been like this in Sydney, and it's not going to be like that for next year. So you know what, just leave it a year and do it again next year.
But Sydney's mayor says the show will go on. Australia's Prime Minister calls it a message of optimism to the world. But experts say all forecasts suggest the new year in Australia will start as poorly as the old one ended. Kim Brunhuber, CBC News, Los Angeles.
Now, looking back at 2019, one of the most captivating stories was a very scary one for many Canadians. For weeks in the summer, 2 killers were on the run. The trail started with murder in British Columbia and ended with the killers' deaths in remote Manitoba. In both provinces, Tanya Fletcher and Angela Johnson tracked the story as it unfolded.
The cross-country manhunt was by far the biggest story I covered this year. It started in mid-July as a BC story, but quickly unfolded into an international situation.
It's unusual to have 2 major investigations undergoing of this nature in northern BC at the same time.
It started with 3 people dead at 2 separate crime scenes that were far apart in remote areas of northern BC, all within a week. And at the same time, we had 2 teen boys, essentially, who were missing.
If you met these 2 fellows, you know, they're not people that you would be afraid of.
At the time, we didn't realize they were suspects, and that's when everything changed. That moment, that day, when police declared that these 2 teens had gone from simply missing to fugitives.
The RCMP are now considering Cam McLeod and Briar Schmigelski as suspects.
We got the call from our assignment desk saying, you need to go to Port Alberni on Vancouver Island, their hometown, and find out who these boys are.
Port Alberni is a picturesque city of about 20,000 people, just about smack dab in the middle of Vancouver Island. But none here ever thought that news would involve 2 of their own and are now murder suspects at the center of a cross-country manhunt.
This is a community that is small enough that this is the story everyone was talking about, yet big enough it was hard to find people who really knew these two well.
He was definitely not the average guy, and he's a little bit weird.
He just gave off a weird kind of a vibe. He just, after a while, just started making people feel uncomfortable.
It was interesting to see the compassion from the community towards the parents, because they said, you know, regardless of how this turns out, I can't imagine going through that as a mother or a father. And that's really what struck me, was even the support from complete strangers, of course for the victims' families, but also for the suspects' families as well.
Later that same day, a short drive east, Schmigelski and McLeod were spotted in a store in Meadow Lake, Saskatchewan. By Monday, they were in northern Manitoba.
We had obviously been watching this story evolve over a number of days, and RCMP put out a tweet saying that they believed that the pair could be in the Gillam area.
The RCMP manhunt moved through the forest near Gillam.
And from that moment, we just sprung into action. The story had arrived on our doorstep, and it was kind of a frantic chase after that.
It's rugged terrain, and somewhere in this vast northern landscape, RCMP believe Cam McLeod and Briar Schmigelski are on the run.
It was very challenging being up in this environment.
With a heat-sensing drone in the sky and a little extra help on the ground, this concerted effort to track down the two suspects who remain on the run comes on a day when the elements are not working in anyone's favor.
And so this area was so big, and we never knew where exactly RCMP would be searching. One day they would be searching in the town of Gillam. You know, the next day they might be searching near a hydro development or way down the road. And so every day we'd wake up and sort of just try to hope that we could figure out what was going on and where the searching was taking place. And the terrain was so difficult. Like, this is dense bush, swampy, buggy. There's areas that don't have cell service. You know, so just logistically trying to piece together each day, it was a challenge.
This morning at approximately 10 a.m., RCMP officers located two male bodies.
Here in Gillam, nagging fear and that heavy police presence had become the norm. So today, word that it's all finally over was met with relief. This story has not necessarily ended for the people living in this area. People are still scared. People still lock their doors. So, you know, even though it seemed like the story was over, for people that really were living it, I don't think it ended that day that the bodies were found.
Most puzzling of all is why. Why, as police allege, did these two young men kill Lucas Fowler, China Dees, and Leonard Dick?
Certainly in Port Alberni, where they were from, people didn't want to talk to us anymore. They wanted closure, and so it was really difficult for people to be able to get that, with the biggest question of all still unanswered, and that being why.
At 6:41, you're looking at a live shot of downtown Vancouver. A bit drizzly today, but get ready for a dump tomorrow. Brett has the full forecast after the break. Okay, hot on the heels of a disappointing loss, Team Canada bounced back in World Juniors action today, defeating Germany 4-1.
Sideboards and an empty net for Canada. Foodie in with Delandria. By Delandria, score! It'll be a short-handed empty net goal for Canada and a 4-1 lead.
An empty netter sealed the deal for the young squad, which held the lead for all 3 periods. The game was considered a must-win for Canada after a crushing 6-0 loss to Russia Saturday. The tournament continues tomorrow with Team Canada taking on the host Czech Republic. That starts at 10 a.m. Pacific time. Well, from ice to snow, Brett.
Yes.
Where's it happening?
I know. We've got actually a large portion of the province that's going to be dealing with significant snow into the interior. So places like Kelowna, you know, it's not unusual to get a few centimeters of snow, but we're talking about maybe a foot of snow.
Oh, wow. And a lot of warnings on the roads.
Lots of warnings and stuff. Yeah, it's going to be a pretty dicey drive out there. And as a way to end off 2019, I mean, it's pretty fitting. Lots of stormy action here on the West Coast. I want to show you, though, first thing, what it looked like today with a look at this morning's time lapse. Certainly nothing overly spectacular, but I guess you could call it classic in a way. Lots of low cloud, a few showers here and there. Overall, not a cold day by any stretch of the imagination. Relatively mild, of course, but elsewhere in the province, cold is definitely the thing because it is more than cold enough, more than sufficiently cold to create all of this snowfall falling over the central interior. So we're talking, as I said, about 20 to 30 centimeters of snow anywhere in blue, so even travel along Highway 3, the Crow's Nest there, up toward Kootenay Pass is going to be a bit dicey. Same thing if you're headed out toward Revelstoke. So essentially just avoid any unnecessary travel. And farther to the north, even Prince George and the Peace region going to be getting anywhere between 10 and 15 centimeters of snow. This is all thanks to a really large system bringing widespread precipitation to the entire province. And I stopped this specifically at midnight on Wednesday because that is when we usher in 2020. And guess what? It's probably going to be a little bit showery here. In terms of our timing for precipitation, you're going to notice that the heaviest rainfall that we're going to be seeing here in Metro Vancouver is largely going to be tomorrow afternoon. So we could be seeing that fall fairly heavily through the afternoon, and by late again, come midnight, we might escape with a little bit of a clearing, but I would definitely still keep all of that rain gear handy just in case. And in terms of where we're at with our rainfall right now, I've been keeping track. We are still looking at an additional 30 to maybe even 60 millimeters of rain at this point in time, and of course, higher for places that are at higher elevation. But here's the thing, we have about 137 millimeters already, the monthly average 148. This means we're going to finish off December with a little bit more rain than average. Our 5-day forecast, though, one thing I want to point out here is that come Wednesday, New Year's Day, 10 degrees as a high for Vancouver. That's a little bit conservative even. We might get a bit warmer than that, so certainly above seasonal to start off 2020. But by next weekend, well, guess what? We're going to go right back in to another rainy period.
Oh, great. Thanks, Brett.
You're welcome.
The Canadarm2 is coming home. Well, figuratively speaking, we'll tell you how next.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
CBC Vancouver is a proud sponsor of the Push International Performing Arts Festival. Expand your horizons and catch groundbreaking performances January 21st to February 9th. And get your tickets and celebrate the city's brightest talent at the BIV Top 40 Under 40 Awards on January 30th. CBC Vancouver's Anita Bathe and Dan Burrett return as co-hosts for this inspiring event. And for more, check us out online.
In a year-end deal announced today, a group of investors are bringing ownership of an iconic Canadian tech company back to Canada. The robotics firm that made the Canada arm went for $1 billion. While it may be a savvy business move for the buyers, as Sarah Levitt tells us, it could be a boost for Canada's space ambitions.
As a Canadian, I'm proud.
Canada has a rich history when it comes to space exploration, and nothing highlights that more, experts say, than the Canadarm. It's a robotic arm system Canadian astronaut David Saint-Jacques says has been key, both for the space shuttle program and here aboard the International Space Station, a system built by McDonnell Detweiler engineers.
Their ingenuity and sense of innovation regularly echoes up here.
McDonnell Detweiler is widely considered the best space technology company in Canada. So there was surprise when in 2017 an American company took ownership. Now, though, it's coming back home, bought by Toronto-based investment firm Northern Private Capital for $1 billion. Its owner, John Risley, sent out this statement. As a Canadian, I'm so proud this iconic Canadian company will once again be owned and controlled in Canada. The purchase is a safe bet, experts say. The new year brings new projects, ones that MDA will play key roles in. In February, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced Canada's partnership in the NASA-led Lunar Gateway Station.
This is an unprecedented opportunity for Canada.
A third version of the Canadarm will be built, something MDA will very likely be tapped to take on. Canada's involvement means a $2 billion investment over 24 years.
The pieces are coming together in a very interesting way for 2020s and where that takes Canada.
This expert says Trudeau's announcement and MDA's return are big moves.
These two were, I would say, cornerstone announcements which paved the way of Canada sort of finding its way back, and now it's, in terms of what's ahead, it's going to be a thriving environment.
One that MDA's new owners are counting on. Sarah Levitt, CBC News, Montreal.
A potential strike tomorrow on New Year's Eve is looming at Montreal's Trudeau and Mirabel airports. Workers who refuel planes have voted in favor of a strike. Now, if a new deal can't be reached by 9 a.m. our time tomorrow, mediators have been called in to try to find a breakthrough. The main sticking points are salaries and work-life balance. Workers have been without a contract since August. Their employer, Swissport, says the strike will cause minimal disruptions, with planes expected to fly as scheduled. Well, 3D printing of dinosaur fossils. After the break, the technology breathing new life into the old. printing is transforming the way we build many things, from medical implants to housing.
It's also inspiring new ways to study and exhibit dinosaur fossils. As Alison Dempster shows us, a museum in Alberta is using 3D modeling to help bring fragile specimens to life.
I'm painting a 3D print right now.
Amy Kowalchuk prepares a jawbone for a new exhibit at the Royal Tyrrell Museum. The replica is based on a fossil tens of millions of years old.
Especially in paleontology, we're dealing with priceless specimens that are very, very delicate, and you really don't want to be damaging them.
These days, Kowalchuk spends a lot of her time behind a lens, building digital blueprints of the museum's discoveries.
You just have to take multiple photographs from multiple angles, and then from that you can triangulate them using computer programs, and then that gives you your 3D model.
That modeling is helping the museum show off some of its most fragile but impressive finds. This tyrannosaur specimen, known as the exploded skull, has 41 pieces, some of them extremely delicate. Thanks to some 3D printed elements, it's now on display.
At the front here, we have the part of the brain that's responsible for sense of smell.
The technology is also adding a new dimension to Francois Terrien's research on dinosaur brains. He's using reconstructed brain cavities to get a better idea of dinosaur behavior, including how they tracked their prey.
Before trying to reconstruct the brain structure or the brain shape of these extinct animals required a lot of work. We needed to break the bones or have skulls that were already broken and then pour latex in there and try to peel out an endocast or a cast of the brain cavity. Now we can all do that with CT scanning and 3D printing. So we can ask a lot of questions that previously would have been impossible to do.
More and more museums are digitizing their collections, helping dinosaurs come alive for researchers and fans alike. Alison Dempster, CBC News, Drumheller, Alberta.
Okay, in 2 days, many people are going for that polar bear dip. Dan, you've done it, right?
I've been nearby.
Well, in Toronto this weekend, there was a bit of a twist on the tradition. Take a look.
Oh my. Dozens of people braved the cold, rainy weather and stripped down for a polar bear skate. What these people didn't wear will go to help keep other people warm. All participants were asked to bring a donation of warm winter clothing to help homeless people in that city.
Not for me.
No, that's a bit barren. That's not the right word, but anyway, no, it would be a bit breezy on that.
A little bit breezy,
Just a little bit.
especially in Toronto. I mean, here, fine, but
yeah, there,
even here, though, I don't
no,
think I'd do
exactly.
it.
Good on them for the donation, though. Absolutely.
Yes. All right, you can always find our news program online. Dan, you're here at 11?
That's right, with all the latest news.
Have a good night.